Todd will now give us a centering message.
These are the brief words from the great Unitarian minister Jose Ballou. Very brief, but I think perfect for opening an annual meeting. If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bonds of peace.
I'm going to call the annual meeting for 2022 to order. As you know, I'm not Gordon Diddins. Gordon had to bow out at the last minute, so I've been appointed by Lynn Janesian, the president, to be the acting moderator. So with that said, the annual meeting is hereby called to order. In order to vote during the meeting, you do need to have that red card having signed in the back. We'll use that during that. We do have a base membership of 290 members. Our quorum for this meeting is 15% or 44. And we have over 44. I'm looking for a final count from the back that we'll need because part of our voting procedure is percentages of vote, 50% or 2/3 vote of those present. So that will come up a little bit later for clarification. So we do have enough people to conduct a business. Most of the motions will be 50% majority to pass. The amendments, which will come up later, do require a 2/3 vote of those present in order to be approved. So we'll come up with that number a little bit later. The agenda for this meeting was circulated pretty broadly, announced from the pulpit, and there have been copies of it in the Sun and in the all-member mail-out, and copies of it in the back. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? We have a so moved from Dick Steele, and a second I heard somewhere. Thank you. We have a second. So we'll go ahead with that agenda, and that will be our guideline. It does have a 2:30 closure time. We'll have to decide if we get to 2:30 and we haven't completed the meeting, we'll have to decide whether to vote to extend the meeting now or to adjourn the meeting and then continue the rest of that business at some other point in time. And what we'll do during any of the votes is, if there's some instances in which I'll just be able to ask, is there any objection? And if there isn't, then I'll just declare that whatever motion happens to be passed, except with regard to the amendments, we're going to have it yay or nay on any amendments, regardless of what, what the presence appears to be with regard to in favor or against, so that everybody will have a chance to vote on an amendment either for or against it. At this time, let me go through some of the extra stuff you may need to know that I would normally present as a parliamentarian. And I've mentioned some of it already. I'm going to reserve the right occasionally, if I have to recess the meeting for a few minutes if I need to look up something in the bylaws, if that issue comes up, or look up something in Robert's Rules of Order. As you know, our bylaws say that if it isn't in our bylaws, then we have to go to Robert's Rules of Order to see if we can solve the issue, if there is an issue. Normally, as I said, I can declare a motion passed or failed just based on asking for those to verbally give me a go-ahead. But in the case of the amendments, we will actually be taking votes. There's something that always comes up, and this is a matter of calling the question or moving the question. If we're in the middle of a motion and somebody gets tired of sitting there and says, I call the question, I want to vote now. Well, you can't just do that. You have to be recognized by me, and that means you need to do that between speakers who are standing up here to talk. And then we can do that, but it takes a second to that motion. It takes a 2/3 vote because we're cutting off people who might want to speak. So it takes 2/3 of a group to vote to close the debate otherwise. So as you think about not doing that, but you're certainly welcome to do that. And the way to avoid that is to be brief when people are speaking. Try not to repeat too much what other people have said, only that you're in favor or against. But if you need to speak and want to make your point, certainly you're welcome to go ahead and do that. But we do have a time limit at the end of the meeting of 2:30, and if we get there and we haven't gone through all the amendments, that could be problematic. And then the other thing, because each amendment is supposed to represent, is to be voted on by 2/3 of those present and able to vote, I'm going to need to reaffirm the numbers for each amendment, because if anybody gets up and leaves, that that changes the numbers incrementally. Whether it's enough to actually change what the number of 2/3 would be may or may not be the case. So Rebecca is in the back, and when she has a total of actual people here, and if you have it now, Rebecca, I can jot it down. We have 72 voting qualified people present. And that's the number we'll use until I get word that may have dropped because of people leaving. Finally, a few things to remember when we're going through these debates or discussions. Restrict yourself to 2 minutes. Robert Janesian will wave a yellow card at you when you've got 30 seconds left. And when you do speak not to me, speak to the audience, and using the microphones preferably. I will ask those in favor of a motion to be on this side and those against the motion to be here, so that we can alternate speakers for and against. That's the best way to try to get through all this. Address only the subject of the motion. If you wander off into another area or territory, I will actually ask you to stop and focus on the amendment, or say, do you have anything else to address the amendment, the motion on the floor? And that's the way we're going to try to get through this meeting. Speak respectfully about other people that you may be commenting on their remarks. That's what they believe, that's what they feel, and we need to respect that. And also listen quietly out there in the audience to what people say, whether you agree with them or don't disagree with them. There's another thing that we haven't used before, but there's something called a point of order. If you believe that somebody is misstating something or is stating a falsehood, you're entitled to raise your hand and say, point of information. And then you ask me what it is you want clarified, and either we'll get that person to clarify it, or I'll get somebody on the board or somebody knowledgeable about it who can answer your concern about information that you consider to be incorrect or misleading. We won't, in order to keep this going the best we can, after you've spoken once, you won't be able to speak a second time until everybody has spoken. And then you won't be able to speak a third time until everybody has spoken their second time. Okay? And we do have a 2:30 end time, as I said before, so let's move as fast as we can through all of this. The next item of business is the approval of the 2021 annual meeting minutes. And they have been posted on the website, and they have been available on the back table. Are there any corrections or additions that anybody would like to make to the minutes that have been on the web and posted and available in the back? Seeing none, I'll declare the minutes approved as circulated and posted on the web. The next item of business is approval of the minutes of the special congregational meeting that was held on April 24th. And they also have been on the web, on our website, and available in the back of the room. Is there any comments, corrections, additions to those minutes? Seeing none, I declare those minutes adopted as posted on the website and as in the back of the room. Next item is a presentation of the candidates for the Board of Trustees, followed by a presentation of a nomination for the nominating team itself. And I'll turn that over to Nancy Avery.
The nominating team, consisting of Sonny Cook, Tom Bradabo, and me, nominates Lilia Riordan Rogers to fill position 4 and Catherine Trestrail to fill position 5. Both of these positions are 3-year terms ending in 2025. Candace Schmidt, whose position's term ends in 2022, is nominated to fill the final 1 year of position 2 due to the resignation of Craig Aldsworth.
Okay, just a comment. This we're using. Most of you may not be familiar with this position 2, position 4, position whatever. The new bylaws set up a system in which we have emphasis on the 7 positions, and various people fill those positions. And over time, it'll help keep track of really how long is each position's term or partial term if somebody's appointed to fill a position that's vacated. So having heard the nominations for the Board of Trustees, there are no other nominees, and a section of our bylaws says if there are no other nominees, that the moderator may simply declare that they are elected, and I so declare that they are elected.
So, Lilia, would you stand, and Candace, just so people can see who you are? Thank you. The nominating team nominates Jan Wingenroth to a 3-year term on the nominating team.
As before, we only have one candidate for this open position, and the bylaws allow the moderator to declare that person elected by acclamation. Now we're to the section of the agenda in which we have reports, and the first report is the minister's report.
I'm going to keep my report very brief because we have a long agenda and I don't want to be redundant. So most of my, actually the entirety of my report is in the annual report. Some of you have it in your hands. You can pick it up in the back or you can read it online. So I'm not going to take time to read the whole thing. I just want to kind of hit the highlights. And I think the biggest interest to me is where we are at in our attendance, which is rather difficult to ascertain these days because our streaming service has obviously exploded as far as usage by our members. We do know that most of those who stream with us online are local. They're about 80% local, and then we get some newer members and friends from mostly around the state, Washington, but also even other countries and some on the East Coast. But the interesting trend in churches around the country is that once the restrictions were limited and people started attending churches in person again, they rose really quickly to about 65% of their pre-COVID levels, and then they have leveled off at that. And so a lot of folks are seeing this as the new normal, that about 35% of people will continue to stream. And by the way, people cross over. It's not like you have the in-person folks and the streamers folks tend to do both. So I think given everything we've gone through the past 3 years, our numbers look pretty good. So I'm pleased with the attendance. Another thing I obviously have continued to focus on in my own ministry the past year is my continued concerns for what's going on with our liberal religion. I'm very concerned that liberal religion may soon disappear in this country, and I think that would be a tragedy. I'm honestly losing hope that I and others are going to be able to turn that around. I'd give it a couple more years. But, and it may come back someday when people wake up and say, my goodness, what did we do? But I'm not so sure we're going to be able to restore it, but I'm going to keep trying for at least a couple more years. I would say that there are, a day doesn't go by where I don't hear from somebody new who has learned about what's going on, wondered what's going on in their own congregation, and have reached out to me to say, oh, I read your book, or I'm following you online, or I'm attending your services. Thanks for what you're doing. This really helps a lot. So I experience that there's an awakening and an increased conflict around the country and what's happening. And to me, that's a good sign. Either people don't know about it, they don't care about it, or they're fighting over it. So right now, the latter to me is the better choice. The rest of my report is really expressing my deep gratitude to just about everyone, and I really name people specifically in my report, particularly our incredible staff and our incredible board and our incredible volunteers and our incredible congregation, because bottom line is we're all in this together, and we've set up systems so that we can work well together to achieve our mission. And I don't want to start thanking you now, because there really are so many people mentioned in the report specifically that I'm just not going to do that. But please know, to everyone here, to all of my staff, and all of our leadership, I know how hard that job can be, and I know how hard you guys have worked the past year and a half on the bylaws. Tom, Gordon Diddens, wish he could be here as well, but I would want to thank so many people. But I'm just going to end with a general gratitude and encourage you to read my annual report, because I remain very grateful to be part of this extraordinary historical community. So thank you for all you do.
Before I proceed to the next report, one of the things that I did forget to do was to introduce to you your current Board of Trustees. And I want to, as I mentioned each of the names, would you please stand? The raucous applause maybe can wait till the end of all the names. Okay, President this year has been Lynn Janesian. Candace Schmidt has been our Vice President. Daryl Vanderlinden as our Secretary. Betsy Rush is Acting Treasurer. Dick Steele and Catherine Trestrail, although Catherine's not here today. And Craig Aldworth served for a little over 2 years, and resigned a few months ago, and thus, due to his resignation, the one trustee position, number 2, was vacant, and the remainder of that term was filled with the immediate past election. So these folks make this work around here. And now let's have a report from Lynn Janesian as president of our board.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here to help us establish a quorum and attend to the business matters of our church. Your time and attention are appreciated. I've written and submitted the first annual report I've ever written in my life as one of my responsibilities as Board of Trustees President. It's probably B+ work, but I did my best to explain the process we used for our bylaws revision, our major focus of this past year, and it includes a bullet point list of the other business items the board addressed over the last 11 months. Rather than read that report to you, I'd like to use my allotted time today, with fellow board member permission, to share some observations that have surfaced in just the last several weeks since our special congregational meeting, where we overwhelmingly voted to adopt our revised bylaws. I do so in hopes that these observations will be helpful in your decision-making process today, as you are being asked to consider further bylaw amendments. I want to start with the trinity of concepts that this Board of Trustees believes is essential for our governance and our ways of interacting with each other as a congregation. 3 T words: transparency, trust, and truth. First, transparency. Shortly after our special congregational meeting, it came to our attention that an email was being circulated with the subject line, "The New Dictatorship in the Old UUCS," written by a member who was clearly frustrated with the outcome of the vote. Not at all unusual in a Unitarian Universalist church. However, the body of that email includes a bit of name-calling and describes a process for adopting our new bylaws that is not at all reflective of the months of weekly, open, transparent workshops the board committed to as we underwent this endeavor, nor is there any mention of the conversations with congregants we held throughout February and March to hear and address your questions, concerns, and feedback. The author, unfortunately, attended none of those sessions. I will leave it to you to decide the appropriate use of email, and I am not here to critique form. Although I'm a huge believer in shining a light on disinformation and misinformation, knowing what an outsized effect it can have on breeding mistrust if it's allowed to fester. I share this with you also because this email raised questions, some from very long-term members of our church, and it was those questions that alerted us to the fact that many of us have a very limited understanding of the day-to-day operations of the church and what it means to operate by policy governance. Myself included, until my service on the board began in 2020 and our deeper dive into our documents over this past year. Nevertheless, our bylaws were actually pretty solid at their core before we did anything to them. We had a few conflicting sections that needed fixing, but the vast majority of the work that we did was make the words more the language more reader-friendly, accurately describing the roles and responsibility of the minister, the board of trustees, and some of our key teams like personnel, finance, and operations, and clarifying the mutual accountability amongst all the governing bodies. It was a slow, sometimes painfully so, thoughtful, and transparent process, resulting in a document that we believe, and most of you believe by your vote, better reflects our intentions of how we wish to govern ourselves. The structure of that governance follows in order federal law, state law, our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, and lastly, our policies and procedures, likely to become the board's next clarifying project. The next T word I want to discuss is trust. One of the achievements of the board this year was the updating and re-signing of the ministerial agreement. Despite any rumors you may have heard or emails you have received, this document update did not change any power, authority, or responsibility structures that have been in place with Reverend Eckloff since he arrived more than a decade ago. Todd was hired as the chief executive of the church and remains so today. The intention section of that document remains word for word the same, and it's so beautifully written, I'd like to share a brief section. The intention of this letter of agreement is to set forth the responsibilities and obligations of the minister to the congregation and of the congregation to the minister as we seek to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to serve one another and the larger community. It is recognized that no matter how carefully this agreement is written and observed, the relationship between the congregation and the minister must be grounded in open communication, mutual trust, good faith, and an open and fair process on both sides. With this in mind, we made updates to the ministerial agreement that include things like terminology changes from management team to operations team, from team on ministry, of which there had been none for many years, to the shared ministry team. Other sections were updated to more clearly define the authority and responsibility of the ministerial role, not to change it, and to ensure there were no conflicts between the ministerial agreement and Article 10 of our bylaws. With open communication, good faith, and a fair process, we've got all the checks and balances in place with an absolute necessary foundation of mutual trust. My last T word of the Trinity is truth. While I found myself a bit perplexed and disappointed about the circulating email, and it was not fun to read, I appreciate the person who sent it to me to make me aware, and I'm grateful for those of you who questioned its content and reached out to clarify any concerns it may have raised for you. I hope you will continue to do so. In a world where we are bombarded with disinformation and misinformation, truth-seeking may be our most necessary endeavor. A quick hint that we practice over and over again in the Tuesday Kurdkara Dojo meeting, of which I'm a little addicted. Watch for ad hominem attacks. If there is name-calling or labeling of another human being, we probably need to investigate a little further to seek the truth. Lastly, my thank yous to Rebecca Adams, our operations manager extraordinaire who takes my phone calls, receives my emails with grace and patience, keeps the board on track during the fiscal year, which I'm sure feels like herding cats sometimes, and even fixes technology glitches when they arise last minute and after hours. Thanks to Tom Mosier for his steadfast advice, his parliamentary expertise, his historical knowledge, and his growing friendship. Thanks to Todd Eckloff for his consistent, dependable approach to leadership, an openness to discuss his perspective, decisions made with reason and always backed by evidence, and most importantly, an unwavering integrity that can be rare to find these days. Thanks to my fellow board members, your support and guidance as we have faced challenges and continue to learn and grow together in what now feels like a little mutual admiration society with a little humor thrown in for good measure. And on behalf of the board, we thank you, this congregation, for the outpouring of support and appreciation we've received from so many of you as we finish up fiscal year 21-22, the year of the bylaws revision. Onward and upward, my friends.
Thank you, Lynn. The next report, the final report, is the treasurer's report that will address how this past fiscal year has been for us. And that would be Betsy Rush.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Betsy Rush. I'm going to be speaking today about the Treasurer's Report, which you can find in this document, which is on the back table. I think it says it's on page 6. Would you like a handheld mic if you're... No, I'm good. Can y'all hear me all right? Yes? Okay, I've got a few slides here to guide my discussion. Speaking of the bylaws that we worked on all year, I thought I would go through a little bit about what the treasurer's role is. This excerpt up here is from Article 7, Section 12, which is about the Board of Trustees. I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's some highlights in there, and that's essentially what I'm doing today as your acting treasurer. As Tom described, I got this role, I think in the last month, probably when I missed a Monday night meeting. I'm picking up for Craig Aldworth, who capably filled the role for us for the last 2 years, I think. But the role of the treasurer is to provide oversight regarding the finances of the church, interpret and disseminate that information to the board and the congregation. Specifically, today, the last bullet there, present an annual report. So that's what I'm up here to do. So Darla, if you'd go to the next slide. After that fun pile of words, now a fun pile of numbers. And it's very tiny, you can't read it, but it's in here. So I'm really just going to present the highlights. Just like Todd said about his year as a minister, I'll just give you a few of the highlights. So essentially, the story of our finances here at church are influenced by COVID still. That is the story. Our building use pattern has changed, and that changes both our expense and income picture. And we had less snow last winter. That changes a little bit of some of our expenses as well. Our income was bolstered by the PPP loans. You may have heard about those in the news. Those are federal grants which were intended to keep full employment. And that's exactly what they did for the UUCS. It started out as a loan, it turned into a grant. We had 2 years' worth. So that's a big part of our income picture, or at least a part of our income picture over the last couple of years. Fundraising, along with that COVID story, fundraising, rental of our building, all of that changed. It was essentially sharply reduced as a result of not gathering and this change in patterns that we're all undergoing. Our pledges have tracked very nicely as of May 25th, and I want to thank each and every one of you for that. That is stupendous. That is absolutely stupendous. We have, I think I'll report on this later, a 94% collection rate, which is a very encouraging number. So, I do need to point out a little bit about this treasurer's report. May 25th, that was a number that I had as of May 25th. Today's June 5th. We haven't yet closed our financial year. I am not an accountant or an economist, but I do understand that we're estimating a little bit at this point. So, and I'll speak more about that when I present the budget, because we haven't really finished the year. So, there's another little tidbit. Our unpledged income is above what we expected for the last year as well. And then the endowment fund has been riding the stock market up and down, if you pay any attention to that stuff, but nonetheless has contributed to our operations and our operational budget. So in conclusion, essentially, we are at 91% of our expected budget for income at this point. 77% of our expenses are budgeted expenses. So those are good. That's a good relationship. And we actually have a surplus that we're going to be able to apply to next year's budget. And I'll bring that up when I present the budget in a few minutes. So that's it for acting treasurer.
Okay, we kind of make a gentle segue from the review of the budget from this past fiscal year to the presentation of the budget by the same starring personality for the upcoming. What? So, are we going to make it? We're going to make it, or do I have to tell a joke or something? I can't do that. I don't do jokes. I can never remember the punchlines.
I fully delegated the facilitation to Tom and didn't pay any attention to the agenda and where this actually comes up, or I wouldn't have gotten down, although. So, anyway, the budget. So now we'll go to the budget. I wanted to, a little bit like the treasurer and apprising you of what that role is all about, I wanted to describe the budget process before I go into what the proposed budget is. And just like that annual report that I presented, the proposed budget is also on the back table in summary form if you want to look at the details. I'm going to give you a high-level just like I did for the treasurer's report. So the process of putting the budget together starts out with drafting. There's those little orange boxes up there. They kind of flow top left corner to the right and around in a circle. So this is a 4-step process that I'm describing of how we arrive at our budget. So the budget is drafted, and just like you might draft your budget, it essentially starts with the things that are immutable, the expenses that you must, administer to. For example, insurance. We don't like to pay it. We all have to do it. We pay insurance on this building. Those kinds of expenses we have to take into consideration and put them in our budget. So that's the first step. That budget is drafted. And then we have the first budget summit. This year it was on March 2nd. It was attended by our finance team, our ops team, board of trustees representatives, the treasurer, and whoever else was interested in coming. And we, at this point, are putting together the budget before we've actually had our generosity campaign or our pledge campaign. So at this point, we consider priorities of the board or the congregation that we've heard, and we're in somewhat aspirational mode. We may put things in that budget that we want to do with our money that might be different from that original draft. So that's what the first budget summit is about. This year, for example, we put in, I think, $10,000. Was that right, Tom? For the capital and reserve fund. We haven't funded that in a few years. The roof, and it's really a bit euphemistic because one of the things we need to do is replace the roof, ultimately, right? Roofs have to be replaced. It's a big expense. So that's what that fund is for, and we were trying to look ahead, and let's try to put a little extra money away this year for that expense. So we put that in the budget as a line item in our first budget summit. And then the generosity pledge campaign happens. That's the third box in the bottom left corner, and approximately March through May. And thanks to that team that organized that and pulled it off, and thanks for your pledges. Then we do some assessment and analysis and compare what our pledges are against what we aspire to in our budget, and make adjustments if necessary. And that's the second budget summit that you see in the bottom right corner of that flow. So we had that in May, and then we have to get a little bit real, and in the world I live in, they say sharpen your pencils, make some cuts, do some juggling, that kind of thing, to see how you can actually make that budget line out and balance, essentially. Because our pledge campaign was didn't quite meet our aspirations. So let me go over a little bit about what some of those changes were, because we do have a balanced budget. You'll see it in the paperwork that's back there on the table. We do have a balanced budget ready for 2023. And how we did that was we reduced that capital reserve fund that we wanted to fund this year in our aspirations. So we'll have to, there's not like there's not money in that fund for what it's worth. That's in a different report. They're not going to be able to add to it as part of our budget this year. So that we reduced that capital reserve fund. We were able to reduce some of the other categories in the budget, essentially looking at actuals from last year. So we could cut those down a little bit. And then we increased some of our expectation from our distance viewer donations. Todd spoke about that in terms of actually knowing who and how our church attendees work. It's not as evident anymore just standing in here. There's things going on we're not as aware of from being in the room here together. So we're hoping for a little bit more there because we actually got a little bit more than we expected last year. So that's good. And then finally, we used that surplus I described in the treasurer's report from the PPP loans and reduced expenses. We are going to use that surplus from last year because, after all, we are a nonprofit organization. We don't get to distribute shareholder, that's not how it works. So we're going to use that extra to balance out the budget for next year. So that's how we arrived at a balanced budget. Thank you to Rebecca and the ops team for all their work in those 4 boxes I described earlier. Just looks like 4 boxes. It's an awful lot of work. and for your participation in it and for your pledges. So, thank you. Should I get down now?
I want to ask if there are any questions.
Sure.
And maybe
Tom.
clarify a couple of something.
Any questions on the process or the actual budget or the proposed budget? Because I just covered it high level, so.
Repeat.
Yes, the question is the PPP money on the proposed budget? I'd have to look at it to see if there is a line item for that. Rebecca says, Rebecca said, no, it is not part of the proposed budget. And actually, that's sensible because we don't expect, it's called the budgetary shortfall reserve. Is it not on there as that, Rebecca?
The budgetary shortfall reserve is on there.
Yes.
Because we received a PPP loan within this fiscal year, that put us in a financial situation where we have a little bit of profit, aka a surplus. So that is due to that PPP grant, and it's also due to our reduced expenses. Okay, so that money, you can't really separate it, it's all part of the big picture. So that surplus is what's being applied to the budgetary shortfall reserve, which is a line item on your revenues at the very top of that.
See if you can say.
Does that make sense? So I wanted to find out how much.
Wait, whoa.
Hang on
We need-
just-
We need to have questions go through the speaker up here. And can you first repeat, kind of summarize what Rebecca said for other people?
Actually, I'm going to ask Rebecca to come up here and repeat, if you don't mind, Rebecca, exactly the answer you gave about where or how the PPP monies are listed in the budget.
And then if you have questions, come to a mic so everybody can hear you. We don't have to go through all this repeat business. Thanks.
Okay, so the PPP grant is not part of our revenue for this proposed budget for the 22-23 fiscal year. We received that money in September of 2021. That's when it was approved as a grant, so that's when it was counted as income. So that was applied to this current fiscal year. Now, because of that revenue and our reduced expenses in this current fiscal year, we will technically have a surplus dollar amount. So because we're a nonprofit, we have to resolve that surplus somewhere in our finances. So what we're going to do with that money is apply it to the budget item that we added for this year, which is that budgetary shortfall reserve. So that basically helps us to create a balanced budget and have that extra money, should we need it, for the 22-23 fiscal year. And if we have any excess money in that surplus, that will go to fund that capital repair and replacement reserve fund for like the roof. Does that make sense?
If you have a question, come up to a mic, please.
I just wanted to know how much,
You have to get real close.
I just wanted to know how much we received in PPP money, and if it's written down and I'm missing it, please let me know.
So we did receive $42,000 for that. For the second round was $42,000. So basically that covers 8 weeks of our employment costs. Yes.
Good questions. Any more? Or anything about the budget or the year-end report, the treasurer's report?
We have one more question coming up.
It's just a little question. I just now found it's on line 6, where it says the budgetary shortfall reserve.
Ah,
But I'm
good.
looking for what line does it, so what line includes the capital fund for making the repair to the roof?
It's way at the end of the budget, at the very back page, and I believe it's called Reserve.
I see it, line 57, thank you.
All righty, thank you. Awesome. Good question. Now at 0 right now. So, Rebecca brought up, I'm sorry, Tom, a good point though. We're using that budgetary shortfall reserve to balance the budget for next year. If there's any remaining, like there was this year at the end of the fiscal year, we will apply it to that capital reserve fund. That's our plan, so, as a board. Yep.
All right, you've had a budget presented. We've had some questions and answers. The next thing, may I have a motion to adopt the budget? Okay, Sue Sturritz is a motion to adopt. Do I have a second? We have a second. Okay, are there any objections or any other comments about the budget? Seeing none, I declare the budget adopted as presented in this meeting. Let's see. Now we're to the amendments, and I think we've done real well. We've only been at this for about 50 minutes. So right now we have 75 qualified voting members present. And that means that a 50% of that, which we don't apply during the amendments, would be 38. And as far as the 2/3 votes needed for any amendment to pass, it would be 50 votes in favor to pass. So we have the amendments have been listed in general description in the notice of the meeting, and they have been available at the back of the room. And we're going to just proceed through these one by one. The First Amendment motion is one by the Board of Trustees, and I will let a board member make that motion, and then we'll get a second, and then we'll have conversation and discussion about it. Pardon? Yeah. Well, to a mic, yes.
All right. The First Amendment is to change Article 16, Section 3. As it currently reads, except during a congregational meeting called for the purpose of considering amendments to the Articles of Incorporation or these bylaws, a member may not propose an amendment to either of these documents unless the proposed amendment has been previously submitted to the board for a review of its appropriateness, conformity, and consistency with the existing document. And what we're proposing to change to is during a congregational meeting, a member may propose an amendment to the Articles of Incorporation or these bylaws only if the proposed amendment has been previously submitted to the board 4 weeks prior to the meeting date.
Okay, and as the motion, well, first can we have a second? Second. Okay, the motion has been seconded. The motion was made by Candace, and the motion maker has an opportunity to speak first to the amendment if you choose to, or to designate someone to speak on your behalf.
No, I'm happy to do it. In hindsight, we read through Section 3, what's currently, what the bylaws say. We thought that it read that amendments could be turned down by the board if they were considered to be inappropriate or didn't conform with existing documents, and that was not our intent. So that's why we are proposing this. So.
Okay, is there, what I would like to do now is to have any discussion, those that would like to approve the amendment to be with this mic, and those who oppose amending it to be at this mic. So would those who wish to make comments please come forward and make any comments? I have a hand in the back. If you want to speak, would you come to a microphone, please? Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Eagle, and I am the one who wrote the email. And part of what caused me to write that email was because I had a 3-day deadline to make the amendments. And this will actually clarify what those deadlines are, so I am in favor of this amendment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing no comments, let us vote. Wait, I have another comment in the back. Before you speak, I would emphasize that the 4 weeks that is mentioned there, submitting to the board, gives the board a chance to deal with trying to see whether there's any kind of domino effects in other parts of the bylaws so they can address it comprehensively when we do get to an amendment. Excuse me, go right ahead.
David Eagle is in favor.
Excuse me, would you give your name, please? We need to have your
My
name.
name is Shelley McClellan. I'm a member. And David Eagle is in support of this motion. He chose this mic, so I'm using this mic because I'm also I'm also, I'm also in favor of this, but some of the existing language that has been crossed out, where it discusses the review of the appropriateness, conformity, and consistency with the existing document, that to me implies a process of back and forth between the board and any members that are wanting to make a proposal such as this. And the change to the language doesn't imply that there's any back and forth trying to make sure that the proposal is in line and consistent with the existing document. I don't know if that's something to address in the future, but I'm also in support of this change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, let's have a vote. This is where we're going to vote for those in favor of the motion. And I won't do a count initially. Let's just raise your red card if you're in favor of the motion. Okay, lower your cards, and those who are opposed to the amendment, raise your cards. Let it show, the record show, there were none who were opposed to it. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, the second amendment, which again requires the 2/3, and as far as I can tell, we have the same number of people here, 75 people, so the number required to approve the motion would be 50 votes. The second motion, I believe, is going to be presented by Susan Tyler Babkirk, and I'll let her make the motion. And then we'll look for a second. And you do have to almost eat that mic.
I'm Susan Tyler Babkirk.
Go for it.
Okay. So I move to add a new subsection E to Article 7, Section 14 to read as follows. Appoint a special committee to carry out evaluations every 2 years of the ministers, and the ministry of the church. Through a variety of means, the special committee will solicit input with the intent to discern strengths, areas for growth, and the congregation's perceived ministerial needs. The special committee will determine evaluation criteria in consultation with representatives from the shared ministry team, the personnel team, the board, and the minister or ministers. The special committee shall consist of 2 members of the shared ministry team and 3 members. So in support of this...
Let's make sure we get a second. Do we have a second, please? There is a second. Thanks. Go ahead and go ahead and address it.
This proposed amendment is a result of a compromise reached between the parties listed in the proposal. Article 7 is a comprehensive article. I hope that you all will read it with good structure. However, I support the amendment. And based on a personal experience as a board president during Linda Hart's tenure here, It needs additional specificity to ensure that we as a congregation are regularly reviewing the various areas of our church's ministry as a whole. A church's ministry is not only about the minister. Just as any organization regularly evaluates how well they are performing their various functions, a church should also engage in such a regular process. And we do have that structure. I just feel like we need a little boost to make sure that we actually do it. This amendment adds a regular process that does not put the entire burden on the shared ministry team. The amendment forms a special committee. This amendment encourages a learning mindset and a collaboration with the personnel team, shared ministry team, the minister, and the board in determining the means and the criteria for each evaluation cycle. That also means if you're on the shared ministry team, you're not signed up for life to have to do this evaluation every 2 years. It gets more buy-in and more people involved. And it does not need to have every detail in the amendment. That is what our policies and procedures are for. So if you're concerned that it hasn't spelled out every little thing, I'm not worried about it because we now have a structure, we have a schedule, and we can work on that later on. The other piece is that in philosophies about evaluating programs and all of that, that grows and changes as the industry grows. You know, I'm not the same evaluator in my own program as 10 years ago as I am now, because lots of new and exciting creative ways of providing evaluations are available. And we have also materials through our own UUA and everywhere else that can feed into creating some really wonderful processes. Thank you.
Okay, are there, are there other comments? And if so, support of the motion on this side and those opposed on that side?
So I served on the acting...
Oh, name, please.
Nancy Avery. I served on the acting team of ministry. Was that what we were called? Yeah. 2 years ago, I think it was. I served with Tom and Lynn.
Sue Sturts.
Sue Stieritz. And when we submitted our report to the board at the end of that time, what Susan is talking about is what we were recommending, that there be an evaluation of the ministries of the church. We didn't set I don't think we set a time frame, but that we needed to look at where our strengths are and where our needs are. So.
Thank you.
My name's Lynn Janishian, and I oppose this bylaw amendment. My reasons are because it is simultaneously way too prescriptive and way too nebulous. It appears to be an evaluation, but under the guise of a needs assessment. Two very different things, neither of which should be a bylaw. Before you vote yes to this amendment, I ask you to consider if you truly want a special committee of a few UU volunteers to evaluate how you choose to engage in the ministry of this church. Here we are, in a literal sanctuary, away from all the noise of a society that constantly evaluates, rates, and judges, or asks us to fill out their tedious survey, 2 stars, 5 stars, A, B, C, D, epic fail. We claim all are welcome here, whether you bring your 5-star enthusiastic contributions of time, finances, and talents, or you're in a 2-star slump and you just want to drag your sorry self in here for some peace, rest, support, and comfort. I already know I've got work to do to be a better human and a better Unitarian. That's why I keep coming back. But the idea of an every 2-year evaluation process at my church makes me want to run for the hills. This proposal is not ready for prime time. It needs a clarity of purpose and an intent, and would be better suited as a policy or procedure if we so choose, not a bylaw. I urge you to vote no for now and encourage us all to continue conversations at a later date with the authors to better understand their intent.
Thank you.
Marianne Winiford. I am in support of this amendment. We have not had a review of the minister or the congregational needs very often. That sort of fell by the wayside for some reason. So I think it does need to be a bylaw so that it's in there so that we will do it. I don't think every 2 years is too often for the congregation to give feedback on how the church is doing, how the minister is doing, how the teams are doing. This is not a referendum on Todd. It's not a referendum on the board. It's a referendum on what the church is doing and what we want it to do. So I am in support of this amendment.
Thank you.
My name is Jean Larson. Oh, thank you. Okay. Yes. My name is Jean Larson, and I'd like to point out that...
Just state if you're in support of it, please, or against it.
yes, I'm in support of this motion. I want to point out that as well as the bylaws, we have the policy governance document, which we operate under. And in that document, in the section on board responsibilities, it already states that the board shall do a yearly evaluation of the minister and the minister, I know the minister, and the ministries. And so adding this to the bylaws is just giving that idea of evaluation a little more oomph. And so the fact that the membership would be 2 people from the shared ministry team and 3 people from any other members, those members could be from the board or any other leadership in the church. So it just makes it so that one group is not in charge of doing the evaluation. You would have a variety of people on the team. So I support this amendment, and I hope you'll vote for it.
Any other comments? Persons would like to step forward? I see one more. If you're against it on this side, for it on that side.
My name is Dan Ekrit. I'm against this amendment for several reasons.
Why don't you get closer to the mic, Dan?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. My name is Dan Ekrit. I'm against this amendment for several reasons. For one, some years ago I was president and we did assess the minister. It was through a document that was supplied by National, and it was intended to help the minister to be aware of areas where they might be strong and where they might be weak. I know it has fell into disuse a little since then, but when I read this amendment, I agree with Lynn that it's way too nebulous, and that we elect a board of directors from the whole congregation to represent us. And I have a problem, frankly, with having an appointed group of people that are going to make that evaluation of a minister. I think that it's possible that we can put together something that's a little more in-depth and gone through in detail by the board. And I also feel that the board should be the one that's doing the evaluation rather than an appointed group. So, in my opinion, I think that we ought to put this to bed for a while, let the board go through this and decide on the process. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom.
We have another speaker.
My name is Stephanie Kennedy, and I'm against this.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
My name is Stephanie Kennedy, and I'm against this because I think appointed people keeps things the same.
Speak into the mic, please.
Keeps things the same. I think this congregation is needing some change. And for us to, well, I'm a new member and I don't participate in the governing of the church because I've had too many things, other things going on. But I think that is, like he said, it was too nebulous, or the president said it just keeps the same people in power, if you would call it that. Because everybody that's going to be appointed is going to be, those 3 people, church members, are going to be those same people that speak up for everybody else. It's not going to be any change. And I think it's just a way to keep things the same, because definitely you're going to change in this church, like everywhere else. It's going to change. More people are going to be different. And I don't think that a set group of people should decide whether the minister or the people that's doing the work in the church, what they're doing. Because evidently some people just keep on doing and others just watch and complain.
Thank you. Other comments? For and against?
My name is Linda Green. I believe it is important for every employee, regardless of position, to be given an evaluation of his or her performance. In every field that I know of, it is a normal business practice to assess strengths and areas for improvement to fulfill the mission of the church or organization. This benefits the person as well as the organization so that both can reach their highest potential.
Thank you.
And that's where I want to focus.
Could we have your name, please?
Sure. Deborah Jackman, music director. And normally I do not speak in these meetings, but I would like to speak about this part of this amendment. I remember when we did do assessments across the board, it wasn't just about the minister, it was about in my case, the music ministry. It is important for somebody in my position to get where the congregation is every so often. 2 years would be nice to find out what the changes are, what serves people best, what may need to change. And I would welcome that kind of input so that I can have a better base from which to do my job. Here's what I notice, is that people are willing to come up to me when they like something and they'll say about it, I love that, of course. But people aren't so willing to come up and tell me what they don't like. And so then I get information around the corners, so to speak. I don't like that very well. I would like to have a situation where I get direct input from the congregation, all kinds of it, so that I can weigh and look at things and try to see where the main lead of the group is, and so that I can find ways to serve people that might be in the minority as much as I can, too. So I would like that. And so we get excited and it says, the special committee will solicit input from all of you. That's what I'm assuming. And discern the strengths and the weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm getting the yellow tag. I've said enough.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Candace Schmidt. I'm a board member. I didn't prepare remarks, so I'll try to be coherent. Oh, okay. In regard to the idea that every employee has to be evaluated, we all experience that. A minister, is a minister supposed to be evaluated by 300 different people? How does that work? When we're evaluated in our jobs, we might have one supervisor or a couple supervisors. So, and 300 people all come to church for their own different reasons. And I just think it would just be a very confused way to get input. And then we also do a 5-year strategic plan where the board solicits input from everyone. And the input is about strengths, areas of growth, and the congregation's perceived needs. So we already do that every 5 years. So thank you.
Thank you. One more comment here, coming. For or against?
I'd just like to make 2 comments.
Name, please.
Excuse me.
Name, please.
I'm Dick Gammon, and I am a member of the shared ministry team, but I'm not speaking from that point of view. I'd like to reinforce what Dan Ekert said, that the board certainly has a role in this. And it seems to me the elected representatives of the church are the people that should be deciding, being in the position to evaluate
Can you
how
get
well
a little
the church,
get a little bit closer to the mic?
how well the church is being managed and how well the people are functioning. My second point is to Deborah, is there anything that prevents you from directly surveying the congregation regularly? Why do you need somebody else to do that for you? I don't really understand.
Dick, please don't address her. You can address me,
Okay,
and if she wishes to respond, she can.
I don't understand why anybody else needs to do that. It seems to me staff members of the church can survey people in their area of expertise to find out what the congregation wants. So I don't understand why you'd want to have somebody else doing that.
So that's certainly your opinion. Good, thank you. Other comments? We have a comment over here from Betsy.
A brief follow-up to what Dick said. I'm sorry, Betsy Rush. I'm on the Board of Trustees. It's not that we're not interested in feedback. It's not that Todd or Debbie or any of us on the board aren't interested in feedback. It's just a matter of making a bylaw out of that feedback process. So as Candace spoke to, we have a strategic plan. And if any of you were here for Todd's sermon earlier, in a way, it would be like putting stop signs in every intersection. And we would be taking away our responsibility as shared ministry team members, as congregants, to seek and listen to that feedback, as board members, etc.
Thank you. Another comment in the back? And we have 45 minutes left in our meeting, and we're not through the Second Amendment yet. I'll just point that out.
Okay, my name is David Eagle, and I've already confessed to that email, but I have been concerned that the new bylaws are giving the minister the complete power and the only means of...
Excuse me, Dick, really David, really focus on the amendment. Do you support it and what, but don't wander too far afield.
I do support the amendment, but my concern is the controls, what checks and balances we have on the minister. And my reading of the bylaws is that the only recourse we currently have is that we can recall the minister. That is like with Trump. He'd love these. He'd have a lifetime appointment, and the only way we could have any check or balance over him would be recalling him. Now, that's my reading of the bylaws. Now, there's something called policy governance, and I will admit I do not understand that.
Up to the microphone, please.
Okay, I agree. I do not understand policy governance, but my understanding was we first get the bylaws, and then we go back to the policies and procedures and revise those to be consistent to the bylaws. If that's the case, if that's where this policy governance process ends up going, we need something in the bylaws, and that's what we're proposing. maybe it would be better if it's in the board, but that the board would be doing that, but that is not yet in the bylaws. So that's why I'm in favor of this motion.
Thank you. We have a comment over here, please. Come forward. No, come forward to a mic, please.
Nancy Han. I have a question, because people are talking about the board doing it and so on, but does the amendment spell out how the evaluation is done? Because that seems to be part of what people are talking about. So I'm in favor of evaluations. I was part of Linda Wittenberg's, but I would wish we had done it differently, I have to tell you. But it went to, I think, everybody and then team leaders and so on. So I just need a little more information. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Seeing none, it's okay. I assume that's a neutral position.
There's been some pretty good arguments here.
And this is Reverend Eckloff.
This is Reverend Eckloff. Except for the Trump comment, I don't think you meant to compare me to Donald Trump. Perhaps not the best analogy, I hope. But, you know, I remember 2.5 years ago during that damn UUA evaluation where they put... Yeah, I remember 2.5 years ago during that evaluation the UUA did, and they came in here and put up all of these horrible statements about me right in front of me and how embarrassed I was. And I had to sit through that. I have to sit through it being evaluated every day. I get people who don't like something I've done, something I've said, a decision I've made every day. And sometimes I have to hear about it for months. Okay, I get it. Susan, I so love you, and I know what you're trying to do, and that's why I'm over here. Because I want there to be an evaluation process of our shared ministry, which includes me. But I want it to be done in a way that is loving and kind, not a triangulation committee that people just get to have a gripe session so that I have to look at that again, you know. And that's what my fear is. I wonder if we can just iron this out a little bit. I want to have, I've always said that, some system in place that evaluates our shared ministry. So I'm just not ready for this one.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? We'll comment from Jean. And we're on the assumption that everybody has spoken. No, wait, Jean, I'm sorry. We have another person who just raised her hand, so you'll have to wait till that person, because you've already spoken once on this.
Hi, my name's Julianne Morse.
Feel free to take the mic and hold it.
That'd be so nice, thank you. I think until Todd stood up, he said exactly what I felt. I like the bylaw, or I like parts of it, but not the entirety. And I think that's what's really important when you come up for an evaluation as a retired school district employee in the public schools. So that's what I would say, is that as I sat there, and Todd, I always thought, yes, I have to stand up and say, I am not for this in its current description. I think it needs to be revised, because I do know this minister, he's willing to listen, but I think we got to do it fairly. And I know as a congregant, and having been here for a while now, we all have our differences, but we do agree that we need to have discussion, and I don't think it's ready. That's my view.
Thank you. We have one more speaker coming down the aisle.
mic is just the right height for me.
Okay.
Thanks, whoever did that. I'd like to speak. Darrell Vanderlinden. I'm on the board. I'd like to speak against this amendment, primarily for one reason. I agree with what Todd said. I think evaluations can be done too often. They can become very acrimonious. I've experienced that in the teaching that I've done. The other point is that the bylaws that we wrote a new section on shared ministry. We put together a process whereby an evaluation of the minister and the ministry of the church would take place. I would like us to give that time and see how that works before we go to something else that is more prescriptive. So that's why I oppose this amendment. Let's give it time, let's see how this works, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're, Gene, okay, we've had somebody between speakers call for the question. Who is that who called for the question? Don Willingham. Do we have a second? A number of people have seconded it. So now we will vote. We need a 2/3 vote, which is 50 people to close debate. Those in favor of closing debate at this time, raise your card. Those opposed, raise their card. Those who want to close debate are very much evident and far in advance of the 50 that are needed. If anybody wants a count vote, we can do a count vote, but from what I see up here, the closing debate is what we're doing. So now we'll vote on the amendment, and the amendment is appoint a special committee to carry out evaluations every 2 years of the ministers and the ministry of the church. Through a variety of means, the special committee will solicit input with the intent to discern strengths, areas of growth, and the congregation's perceived ministerial needs. The special committee will determine the evaluation criteria in consultation with the representatives from the shared ministry team, personnel team, board, and the ministers. The special committee shall consist of 2 members of the shared ministry team and 3 members. Those in favor, vote, raise your hand. Those in favor? I need a count from the counters. One plus 5. What? 10. Okay, that is, okay, 18. Okay, those who are against the amendment, please raise your cards. Is it up higher, Gene? Yeah. Ten plus 14 plus plus 11. Somebody giving me a grand total? I'm just taking down some brief notes. $48. That is, nope, we had far less than 2/3 that were for it, so the motion fails by 18 to 48. Is that your final figure there? Okay. All right. So now we move to the next amendment, which is the third amendment. It failed. Well, it didn't approve. Okay, the next amendment, my understanding, is presented by Gene Larson, what we're calling Amendment 3. And you can address the motion after you make the motion. And it's seconded.
Jean Larson again.
Oh, you need to be a lot closer to
Jean Larson, yes. Okay, the third amendment motion pertains to the instructions that are given to the shared ministry team. And it's a change to Article 15, Section 1C. And we want to change it to read as follows. The team, meaning the shared ministry team, shall encourage input from congregants and share impressions, observations, concerns, and recommendations with the board verbally, at least in the spring and fall. And the only change is we've added the words encourage input from congregants. Yeah, that's the only addition to this.
Okay, do we have a second? I said there are a number of seconds, so proceed explaining it. If you want to hold the mic, if you can
all right.
get it out from that thing.
No, it doesn't want to come out. Thank you. Okay. This year, a reorganized shared ministry team was appointed at the beginning of the year. As I spoke to church members throughout the year, I found that very few knew that this team existed. This team is where members can take any concerns or suggestions about the operations of the church. Therefore, the addition of the words encourage input from congregants will ensure that the committee itself publicize their existence and their purpose. So I approve this amendment.
Thank you. Do we have any comments, one way or the other?
My name is Linda Green. I need to read. As co-chair of the Generosity Campaign, I feel impelled to give feedback from our team's contacts. Out of our church's 195 pledging units, our team contacted the 103 households who had not responded by the end of the campaign. Of the 103 contacts, 24 were with folks who are unhappy with the church. 14 would not pledge at all, and 4 had decided to resign. Most of these 24 people shared concerns common with my own. Here is my own concern. I love this church, but I feel our minister needs to heed input from people asking for change and deal with them in a spirit of collaboration. I am weary of hearing about the UUA divisions in our church.
Linda, excuse me, you're not really addressing the motion. Please address the point of the motion, the 5 words that are being added.
The 5 words that are being added.
Go ahead.
The reason I was bringing this up was that I feel that if the congregation had known that there was a shared ministry team where concerns could be addressed, perhaps this information could have led to important positive change. Therefore, I support this amendment, which seeks to proactively encourage input from congregants.
Thank you. Other persons that wish to comment? And also, I see people leaving, and I will need a count for, when we vote to know whether we're changing things. So someone come forward and share that with me. Yeah, come on, David.
My name is David Eagle, and I support the motion, and I basically want to echo what Linda said. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you for your brevity. Other persons that wish to comment on it?
I actually like the spirit of the additional words to this. However, I feel some need to protect at least the current configuration of the shared ministry team, which has expressed that it does not want to be a triangulation team. If it is looked upon by the congregants as, if we don't like something Todd's doing, we'll go talk to them, and then they'll tell Todd. That's not what the spirit of the team is about. And, I do collaborate with those who come to me when I can, but I'm also a very strong person who has my own beliefs about how things should be done, and when the authority has been given me to make certain decisions, and I think they're the right ones, I'll continue to make those. And shared ministry, and I talk about that stuff a lot.
Thank you. Can I have is there a change in the number of voting members present? 73. We're down to 73, okay. Okay, any other persons who wish to come forward?
My name is Sue Stieritz, and I'm thinking this through as I walk up here. Having served on the interim team on ministry, which is now called the shared ministry team, I am in favor of this. I know there are people who do not feel comfortable for one reason or another coming forward and speaking to a figurehead, which in this case is our minister. And I would like to see them have an avenue of what would be felt a neutral place, and with the thought that they would share my words or my intent. I have an open relationship with Todd, so I don't have this problem, but in making the phone calls as I was on the generosity team, I did get a strong sense of this. So I encouraged that the wording and the use of the shared ministry team for this process.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we have another comment. We're down to 25 minutes before the drop dead time.
I won't use it all up. I'm Karen Dorn Steele, and I support this amendment. I'm struck by the words of the Spokane Alliance. We're members of the Spokane Alliance. We pay dues to the Spokane Alliance. We help the Spokane Alliance accomplish major social justice goals in the city of Spokane. And one of their main slogans is, all organizing is reorganizing. And that includes within churches. And I think this gives an additional avenue through the shared ministry team for people to express their feelings about the direction of the church. And I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing no other comments, we'll proceed to vote. Those in favor of the motion, raise your cards. It looks to me like an overwhelming number. Let's put your cards down and have those against vote against and see where we're at. Those who are against the amendment. How many do we have against it there? Talliers. Had 8 against, and we had a total of 73 remaining, so the amendment is approved. Okay, the Fourth Amendment, I believe, is going to be presented by Linda Green. And you can come forward and read that motion into record. And it seems to be related to the Fifth Amendment also, so feel free to mention the connection between the two if that helps explain it.
That was just what I was going to do.
Okay, let's lower that.
My name is Linda Green. I move that we change the Article 8, Section 2 to read as follows. The operations team shall consist of the following: the senior minister, the operations manager, and 3 members of the congregation appointed by the board. UUCS staff members serving on the team shall cease their participation immediately upon no longer being employed. This amendment actually dovetails into the next proposed amendment change just because it makes it mandatory for this team to consist of 5 members, so that when voting on an issue, when consensus cannot be reached, the majority can be determined.
Okay, do we have a second? We have a second. Okay, now we have discussion for and against. And you've kind of made your case, if you think you have.
The only difference here is between changing it from 2 to 4 to make it 3.
And just for clarification, whether it's 3 or 2 to 4, they're appointed by the board. These are members appointed by the board for the operations team, right? Yeah, okay. Comments? For and against? And this is just pertaining to the 3 versus 2 to 4, even though they're linked.
Yes, I am in favor of this
David,
motion. My name is David Eagle, and I am in favor of this motion. And the reason is of its connection with the next motion. I am that the bylaws end up making it so that the minister has ultimate say over everything in the congregation. Not that he's necessarily using that. When I compared him with Trump, actually I was not comparing him with Trump. When we write the bylaws, what's that?
No.
When we write bylaws, we should not just write the bylaws for a current minister, we should write them for possible future ministers as well. And if we write the bylaws so that that future minister can basically control the church completely, that is a problem. Historically, congregational churches have been congregational churches because they didn't want bishops determining everything. That goes back to the Puritans and the Pilgrims, and actually our church came around from that. You probably know this, Todd. There were the new lights and the old lights, and that the old lights were the...
David, would you please just focus on the 3 versus 2 to 4?
Okay. Anyway, I'm in favor of that, this, so that we end up having a majority if we're going to let the congregational church or the congregation actually make decisions for the church rather than it being solely the decision of the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Other persons for and against?
I'm Lynn Janishian, and I'm opposed to this amendment. Volunteers are really hard to come by. And immediately, if volunteers move, they resign, they make different decisions, they join other teams, they die, they quit, they do all different kinds of things. This amendment is written specifically for a concern that does not exist in our church, according to all of the things I tried to talk about as clearly as I could in my president's report today. A new minister who arrives to this church would have their own ministerial agreement, and we would start from scratch. So I'm deeply against this amendment because we would be out of conformity with our bylaws the minute one of the three chooses to move on.
Thank you. Are
2 to
there
4
other
is
comments
great.
people would like to come forward? Forward and against?
I'm Susan Tyler Babkirk. I'm also opposed to this, echoing some of what Lynn said, with this being, the meetings are usually during the day. I think the 2 to 4 gives more flexibility for the reality of volunteers serving on that. And it also, to me, feels a little bit like a solution looking for a problem. I think that the business, the day-to-day business of the church can be handled, and the 2 to 4 gives enough flexibility that if we have more people that are able to do that meeting and serve on that, great. But if not, we're not stuck with really scrambling to try to make decisions in the operations team.
Thank you. Other comments? Feel free, people that want to speak, to come up close to the microphone so we don't waste time walking up to the microphone and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it wants to be in my hand, apparently. My name is Sue Stieritz, and I thought I would vote for this. But the more I'm hearing, and I've served on the operations team as from the board as a representative for 2 years or more, and also on the team itself. And I never saw Todd say, well, this is absolute, we're going to do what I want. I never saw that. And I understand, I think the thing that turned me was when Lynn said that if we got a new minister, it would start all over. So if this is in a bylaw, we don't change our bylaws necessarily right away when we get a new minister. So we would be stuck with this, and literally stuck if we lose one of those 5 people. So with that in mind, I am not for this.
We have one more comment, at least.
Darrell Vanderlinden. I'm opposed to this amendment for one reason. That is primarily the operations team deals with the day-to-day operations of the church, like hiring somebody to plow the parking lot, hiring somebody to fix the refrigerator. This team, and Todd, as part of this team, does not have control over all the rest of the church. I just want to dispel that concept. So Todd being able to make decisions as the chief executive, as the person on this operation team, only pertains to what happens in the day-to-day operations, not the wider church. Thank you.
Other comments? Before David comes forward, do we have any other comments? Okay, hold it, Todd. Come forward and state your point of question or point of order or point of information. And your name, please, David.
My name's David Eagle, and I'm asking a point of order from somebody on the board, such as Darrell. And that is that he was talking about that, I have a little senior moment here, but that...
Yeah, get closer to those hard of hearing.
Darrell, you had said that the decisions at the operations team are just mundane, and generally I agree with you. My impression, though, was that all the teams, special teams of the church, are really subcommittees or sub-teams of the operations team. And if there are decisions that apply to them, the point of order question is, do those go through the operations team, or do they go through someplace else like the board? Thank you.
Okay, you've asked for a point of order of clarification of the bylaws, and this is Tom Mosier. And let me find this section so we can see if we can clarify this. And a little bit of hesitation while I find the right section. Okay, I think we're talking about Article 8, Section 7, which reads, "The operations team shall decide whether to recognize/approve or reestablish as affiliated with UUCS a proposed or pre-existing team or group. The team shall not," referring to the operations team, "shall not appoint teams or members of teams as set forth," and then it lists several articles. "Any group or body recognized or approved by the team," that being the operations team, "with permission of the operations team any group or body recognized or approved by the operations team with permission of the team may establish its own rules, operations, or protocols." So what we've got is the way it reads now, the operations team, whether it's 2 to 4 members or 3 members, is to be there to recognize either pre-existing teams that have gone out of, have not been existing, or new ones. So that's the way the bylaws read. I don't know whether that clarifies an issue or not, but that seemed to be what you were questioning with regard to what Darrell said. So we have Candace, who serves as the liaison. We have Todd, who's on the team, and some past members of the team. If you want to address this point of trying to clarify this, somebody go ahead and have at it.
As I think anybody on any team in the church knows, neither I or the operations team run your meetings. We do help if you come to us and say, can we possibly finance a project? Are there rules, are there boundaries that prevent us from doing so? We're there for that information, but the operations team it does not have subcommittees. And our teams are not subcommittees. So I'm glad you asked, David. That's a misnomer that is unsubstantiated in every way.
Okay,
I wanted to address the article real quickly.
Okay.
Because I am opposed to this. I'm not moving the microphone because this is not a simple change from between 2 and 4 to 3. The 3 is a setup for the next motion, which will basically make decisions around that the chief executive ultimately has the responsibility for an electoral process. And so they need 3 to offset. We need 3 to offset the number of votes, right? So that it is a committee of members making staffing decisions. The decisions professional staff have been hired to make with input from members. So if this is changed and the next one is changed, it basically changes my role in the church. It violates, as far as I'm concerned, the new agreement that I recently signed with the board. And that's not going to work for me. And I don't think I'm going to be ready to sign another one so quickly. It would be very difficult to work in a church where I don't have the authority to carry out the responsibilities that you have called me to do. That's not fair.
Thank you. We're down to about 9 minutes left, and we're addressing 3 verses 2 to 4, and still have the other amendment to deal with.
Hi, I'm Candace Schmidt. I've been the liaison to the ops team for the last 2 years, so I'm pretty familiar with how it works. And I've gone through the bylaws and our policies and procedures as it pertains particularly to the operations team, because I wanted to understand it. And in the bylaws, it says that the operations team absolutely cannot go outside the limitations that are set for it in the policies and procedures. And within those limitations is manage the expenditures of the church during the year, safety and security, recognizing new teams, not controlling or telling those teams what to do. And there's a 4th one that I'm blanking on. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Other comments regarding this amendment of changing the wording from 2 to 4 to 3? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. So those in favor of changing the wording from 2 to 4 to 3, please raise your red cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we have 5-4, and just for a matter of, so I think the motion fails, but just for those against the motion, please raise your red cards. Okay. Okay, 73 minus 5, 60, so it's 5-4, 68 against. So, the next amendment, which is related, as was stated before, I think, are you going to present that, David? Amendment 5?
My name's David Egan. I'll read the amendment, and there may be ignorance on my part, so I need to consult with Linda to see. Hopefully Linda will come up, or Linda, do you want to actually scrap the amendment based on the confusion we've had?
If no amendments actually put on the floor, then we don't have anything to discuss. That's up to you guys.
Can I have the liberty to at least say my concerns and then withdraw the amendment?
I would say make the motion, and then if it's seconded, you could state you can state your position of support. So read the amendment.
Read the amendment, or can we withdraw the amendment?
No. Well,
can we withdraw the amendment?
If you want to make any comments about it, we have to have a motion on the floor.
Like, can we withdraw the amendment?
If you withdraw the amendment, then there is nothing to discuss, because there's no amendment on the floor.
I'm going to do it so that I can at least discuss my concern.
Okay.
But I do recognize, based on what I was told, that I've got some ignorance here. Let me read that motion. Currently, what the article says is that if consensus cannot be reached, then the team shall accept the decision of the senior minister in his or her role as the chief executive. And what we were proposing is that instead of if the minister's decision, that we change that to majority rule, which is what happens in most other congregations.
So just for clarification, the actual way the text read is the operations team shall make every effort to operate by consensus. In the event consensus can't be reached on an issue, the team shall accept the majority decision of the team rather than accept the decision of the minister as chief executive.
That's correct.
Okay, second to that motion? Okay, there's a second. So if you would like, David, you could address what your thinking is on this, because you made the motion. Okay.
All right, my thinking was I am opposed. I have a handout, and if I'm allowed to pass that out, the handout talks about congregational churches historically. And congregational churches have not been where the minister has absolute control. Now, Todd actually talked as chief executive that he does have that control. And that's what I'd like to change. I do not see that as, I thought the avenue to do that was with the operations team, because the way it reads, I don't like the way it reads. I would prefer it, even for mundane issues, be majority rule. I think that's how we should have things more throughout the church. I am in favor of a church being controlled by the congregation, not the minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, one way or the other? And we're getting down to the last few minutes here. We might even actually make this. We got one coming forward first.
Mayor Mary Ann Winiford. I actually have a point of information.
Okay.
I think there is maybe some misunderstanding between what the operations team is responsible for and what the Board of Trustees is responsible for. My understanding is that the minister is accountable to the Board of Trustees. And so then it would be the Board of Trustees that sort of addressed what David was saying. They're the ones who would talk to Todd and put checks and balances on Todd. But I don't think we understand the difference between their areas of responsibility. So that's my part of information is what does the Board of Trustees do compared to the operations?
Okay, that's a question I think it needs to really be addressed by someone from the board. The bylaws, attempt to make a distinction, and the bylaws are based on the concept of policy governance. So from that point, can you give your best shot at addressing that?
I can read my words that I tried earlier to try to explain that.
And this is Lynn
Lynn
Janishian.
Janishian, President of the Board of Trustees right now. And truly, guys, I'm learning this as I go also. Thank you. Thanks, Todd. So what I can do is assure you that the checks and balances are in place. The Board of Trustees has a person who is who goes to, or a liaison who goes to all of the operations team meetings and comes to every board meeting to talk about the decisions that were made at the operations team. The vast majority of the decisions of the operations team are just truly day-to-day basis, things that go on in a church that have to be made by day-to-day decisions. I know I'm not doing this really, I'm just flying here by the seat of my pants, but consensus, my understanding is that consensus is typically always reached for those decisions, if not 100% of the time, or maybe once in 10 years where that has not been done. If you hire somebody on in any organization as the chief executive to make ultimate decisions in an organization and then tell them they have no authority but can be overruled by a group of volunteers who are not elected by the congregation, you've got nothing. You've got a person who's got no authority to do anything ultimately when we need that to be done. And we've got certainly very committed volunteers here, very frequently committed volunteers, but they're not always present. What we have with the chief executive is somebody who is consistent, aware, understands the policies, the procedures, the bylaws, and how each of those things operate together. So I think there is clearly, and I really appreciate your honesty, David, about the ignorance that this bylaw proposal was created under. And so I think it just needs more time, and it looks to me like some people have some needs that we could better educate ourselves and each other to try to make sure we all understand the governance of our church.
Okay. Technically, we have reached the 2:30 deadline. Can I just have a show of red cards that would like to continue long enough to end this amendment one way or another? Overwhelming number of people wish us to continue right now until we reach an end. So are there any other comments regarding the amendment, which essentially changes from a minister making the final ultimate decision to a vote of a team which can number from 2 to 4 members?
Again, my name is Dan Ekrit. I have been a member of the ops team, I think twice, and been with Jane and been with Sue on many of the ops team meetings for, I don't know how many years, maybe eight years, something like that. And I can tell you never once during those 8 years did I ever hear any dictatorship coming from Todd on an issue. We discussed the issues, and as somebody said, this is not the board, this is the ops team. The ops team runs the day-to-day business of the church. They do the little things. They work with Rebecca. Rebecca brings in the issues that may have come up during the last couple of weeks, and we went through those. We were not dictating at any time to any of the particular different groups around the church. There's no dictatorship involved in this thing. It's getting the business of the church done. And then the ops team really reports to the board, who was elected by you. And so I really don't understand this issue at all. And one other point, the number of companies I worked through in the country, I never have worked for one that didn't have a president or a CEO. They all had CEOs, they all had CFOs. They all had their staff that could work with that chief executive officer. And that's what we have here. So I really don't understand the problem that we're going through here and taking the minister out of the loop and saying you can't be part of that final decision, particularly in the ops team.
Okay, that's it. One other comment? Are you for or against? And your name, please.
My name is Pam Larrett, and I have had a church since Todd arrived, and not before that, that I felt had a heart and a spirit and a mind for...
I think the battery's died. Max has given up.
Almost time to go home then, huh?
I would just like to be very brief and say that I have never, in my many years, had a leader that I could believe, trust, believe that he knew what he was doing, that had messages for us that were invaluable almost every Sunday. And so this kind of quarrelsome meeting around the issues of bylaws.
We're not making this personal. We're just talking about whether the minister's role is chief executive or outvoted by a committee.
So I think that without stretching it any further, that the leadership that we have right now should not be compromised any further than it already has been by thanks to the folks in Boston. I think we have a great person here, and I don't want to see these amendments passed, and they haven't, most of them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Linda Green coming forward.
I was going to actually address the amendment, but I know it's not going to pass, so I'm using my bully pulpit to say I want to commend our board, and specifically our board president, Lynn Janesian, for the cool-headed and compassionate way she approached this daunting task of gathering together information, distilling it, and being vulnerable to members who don't agree with her. I was one of those people, but I still think of Lynn as my friend, and vice versa, I hope.
Okay. With that testimonial, let's vote on the amendment. The amendment essentially would be to make the majority vote of the operations team, which includes the senior minister, ruling if there's no consensus reached versus the senior minister making the decision in the event consensus can't be reached. So those in favor of the motion to make it a majority rule, raise your red cards, please. Four. Those against the motion, raise yours. Overwhelmingly against the motion, actually it come down to about 69 against it if the same number of people are here, last counted. So the motion fails. And then as far as the end of the meeting, we did have on there an open forum if there was time. There is no time permitting, so we'll have to figure out another way to do that. And I declare the meeting adjourned, and we do have a chance to sing shalom and embrace each other spiritually or physically. So here comes Deborah.
I'm just gonna start it a cappella. Here we go. Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom.
A big thank you from me, everybody.